Good morning. My name is Isabel and I worship with the Church of Holy Trinity in Formby. I'm here to share with you a reflection on the book of Joshua, and the reading starts in chapter 21 at verse 43. So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their forefathers, and they took possession of it and settled there. The Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their forefathers. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord handed all their enemies over to them. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to the house of Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and said to them, "You have done all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded, and you have obeyed me in everything I commanded. For a long time now, to this very day, you have not deserted your brothers, but have carried out the mission the Lord your God gave you. Now that the Lord your God has given your brothers rest, as he promised, return to your homes in the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave to you on the other side of the Jordan. But be very careful to keep the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to obey his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul." Then Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their homes. To the half-tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given land in Bashan, and to the other half of the tribe, Joshua gave land on the west side of the Jordan with their brothers. When Joshua sent them home, he blessed them, saying, "Return to your homes with your great wealth, with large herds of livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, and iron, and a great quantity of clothing, and divide with your brothers the plunder from your enemies." God keeps his promises. This passage says it over and over again. He did this as he had sworn to their forefathers. Not one of the Lord's good promises to the house of Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled. He kept his promises then, and he keeps his promises now. And Jesus has made a most amazing promise to us. "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." That's a pretty amazing promise too. With the promises go commandments. The Israelites had very clear commandments about how they were to love the Lord their God, to walk in all his ways, to obey his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him. And that was spelt out for them in lots of detail of the law. Jesus gave us a command too. "If you love me, you will obey what I command." And his command was that we should love one another. It makes it simpler, but really no easier to fulfill. And in some ways, the promise that he's made for us, that can be harder for us to grab hold of. The Israelites' promise was for something very tangible. They could picture what the land that they had been promised looked like. They could imagine what it would be like to settle there and rear their flocks and grow their crops. We know that Jesus has promised us that we will be with him. But we don't know what that looks like. And at times when everything feels uncertain, it can feel like a difficult promise to hold on to. Maybe it's easier to hold on to his command. His command was to love one another. And even when we don't quite know where we're going, even when the world around us looks very complicated, even when we can't imagine how it can be that one day we will simply be with Jesus, and with all of those things that distract and frighten and confuse us stripped away. We know what it means to love one another. And that's the command that he tells us to hold on to. And we know that if we follow his commands, he will keep his promises, just as God kept his promises to the Israelites way back in the Old Testament. One of the symbols of God's promise is said to be a rainbow. We've seen lots of rainbows in the last few months. In people's windows, all over social media. It feels like it's becoming a slightly, almost a devalued symbol sometimes. But at the weekend, I was down on the beach with my kids and my husband, and not feeling so great, and finding it quite hard to hold on to God's promise. And there were storm clouds, amazing storm clouds gathering, and the most extraordinary rainbow. And I looked at that rainbow, and I was reminded of God's promise, and reminded that God keeps his promises. And I know that even at times when it's hard to hold on to that promise, he's given me a command to hold on to too, and that's to love one another. And if all I can do is to try to express that love, I can't do it perfectly. I get tired of it sometimes. I fall short in the way I show love. But God honours our attempts to follow his commandments. And if we try to show love to one another, God will work through that love in ways that we can't understand. Isn't it wonderful to know that he's so much bigger than we are? I leave you with that thought, and I pray that as you go through this week, God's promises to you will be real, will sustain you, and that in return you will have your way made easier to follow his commands and to show his love to one another.